Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. Whatever time zone you're in, be aware that it's just a time zone, that there really isn't any time. So we're right here together. And we're talking about an adventure of creation. We're having a conversation about an adventure of releasing our inner splendor, an adventure of opening ourselves up to our soul's purpose. And it is an adventure. I can remember a number of years ago when Conversations with God was first released. And I thought it was very powerful because it really articulated, the principles that I was teaching, and it brought forth millions of people into this discussion. Heretofore, people were unconscious. They had all kinds of dim views about the presence of God. And I think about those early days. I think about the adventure of my own soul. Most people don't know this, but first of all, let me just say something about Neale and I have bumped into each other over the years at conferences and seminars and programs, and we've always had a liking of each other. And it's probably more than a liking, it's like really a coherence around these fundamental ideas and principles
I love
and practices.
I'm in love with you.
Yeah.
I'm just going to give it a name.
Yeah, love is a good name. It's a good word. And I love this gentleman, this guy, and he's also a rascal. I love that because I'm a rascal as well. And so over the years, there's been this love affair. And today we get to play with each other in a way we've never played with each other before. But I'd say, in my own unfolding, there was a time in my life where I didn't go by Michael. I actually had a different name. And my name at that time was Param Atman. And I wrote under that name. I had little pamphlets under that name because I was reading spiritual text about the Atman presence and Param Atman. And Param Atman actually lit up in the book. And so I took that on as my spiritual name. And that's what my name was. I taught under that name. I'm not talking about having agape, it's way before agape. I had private clients, did healings with people. And interestingly enough, I came upon this realization, that Michael was not evolving because I was hanging out in this identity called Param Atman, which was authentic, it was real. And I realized in order for Michael's soul to evolve, I had to go back and be Michael again. So I dropped the name Param Atman, reclaimed Michael so that Michael's soul could evolve to its next iteration. Whereas when I was playing as Param Atman, I shouldn't say the word playing because it was real. I was in these higher frequencies, but I wasn't integrated into Michael. So one of the things I did, I turned my garage into a soundproof room. I had mattresses, and I would go into this room at least 2 hours every single day. And I would do inner work. Now keep in mind, I had this big spiritual awakening, but I needed to integrate it. And I would do mirror work. I would do affirmation work. I would do anger work. I would do forgiveness work. I would do this work for hours every single day, looking at myself in the mirror and say, you, Michael, are. He, Michael, is. I, Michael, am. I would do all this kind of work so I could integrate these higher frequencies into Michael so that this person could evolve and become a greater iteration. So I wasn't split. It wasn't like, I go into these higher frequencies and then come back, And that particular time in my life, a lot of inner work, a lot of looking at unevolved aspects of myself, immature aspects, seeds of greatness that were in embryonic states. And as the years went on, Michael became more integrated with the higher frequencies and could be more of himself. But you know what? It was an adventure. And one of the things it taught me was that every single being has that greatness within them. I'm not special. I'm not special. My mother wasn't a virgin, and lo and behold, there's Michael. We all have the capacity to go on an adventure and actually participate in an act of creation, as you like to say. We get to participate in an act of creation and become artists of our soul and paint with the colors of our soul on this canvas that we call time and space. It's a canvas that we get to paint with the colors of our soul, evolve into our greatest expression, and it's infinite, greater expressions of ourself. And that journey today has brought me sitting here with Neale Donald Walsch, who masterfully, even though he doesn't like that word, sometimes masterfully brings forth what he has heard from the power and the presence and the love of God. And it's brought me to this moment where I get to speak to people every single week and teach every week and bring forth articulations of the Spirit that today I'm well more integrated in than when I first had my first awakening, which I saw everything, but I wasn't integrated with it. I could describe it, but it took years of integration work and adventure to enter into those kind of moments of creation. So that I'm here with you today.
And you know what, Michael? I want to add that it doesn't have to take years of integration. I understood that it took years for Michael, and it took years for me, frankly. But my big message that I try to share as part of this particular Masterclass program is that it doesn't have to take years. And this might even be overpromising, but the truth is, for me, it can happen relatively quickly. You know, it's interesting, Michael, you and I have had so many experiences in life that are identical or very, very nearly identical. You're not going to believe this. You're going to think I'm making this up. You guys might think I'm making this up too right now. But in fact, I too spent the first 25 years of my life with a different name. I was known as Bob White.
Really?
Yeah, it was a broadcasting name. It was my name for after I was a member of the American Federation of Radio and Television Artists and Equity, Actors Equity. And my name on the air was Bob White because when I first started in broadcasting at the age of 19, I would use my birth name, Neale Walsch. But my program director at the first radio station that I worked at said, every time I'd come on the air and I'd say 20 after 4 o'clock on the Neale Walsch show, he kept on getting letters to Neale Wall because it sounded like the Neale Walsch show.
Oh, Neale Walsch show, yeah.
Yeah, because I couldn't separate it. And then I found myself exaggerating it, saying the Neale Walsch show, and that sounded kind of weird. So finding the program director or the station manager, somebody came in and said, you need to change your name if you're going to be in this business because this name doesn't work in this business. So I chose the name Bob White. And I was known as Bob White in 4 different radio markets around the country and became Bob White. So now I signed autographs that way, at events that I was at, my big events, in those days I would be the personality at the opening of a new shopping center. With Bob White from WYRE Radio, Anyway, what's funny is I too started with a whole different persona, and I became that persona.
Yeah.
I left my childhood name behind. I became Bob White, developed a whole personality around that.
Yeah.
And a whole persona. And then I had my conversation with God experience when everything in my life had fallen apart. And without getting into all the details of that, but I just had, because the details are, of course, in the books, in case you want to pick up one of those books, book 1 in particular. But when I had my conversation with God, I had the exact same experience you're just describing. Because even when I was experiencing the book, I was still thinking of myself as Bob White. And then it came time to maybe send it to a publisher because I often tell the story, and if you've heard the story once before, please forgive me, but to give you the 10-second version, I was told in the dialogue, this will one day become a book. You will make of this one day a book. And so I went to the publisher that I thought I could get to publish it, small-time publisher. They had only published 3 or 4 books a year. But I had to decide, what name am I going to put on the cover of the book?
Right.
And I came this far from, I've been Bob White for 20 years. I mean, of course, it's going to be Bob White. And then, so not unlike your experience, I thought, it doesn't feel integrated. It doesn't feel like who I am. It doesn't feel, I can't put, some fake name that's not even me on the cover of this book. So I decided to put my entire name on the cover of the book, Neale Donald Walsch. thinking that it would sell, 4,000 or 5,000 copies on a good year. And, there'd be one of those self-help books you see in the bookstore. But it turned out to be a little bit different. But then I had to step into,
Yes.
okay, who is Neale Donald Walsch?
Right.
And if you don't think writing a book called Conversations with God will stop you in your tracks and make you decide who is Neale Donald Walsch, try it sometime. Because it will, if nothing else does, this will. So what I have tried to do in my portions of these modules that we're creating together for this wonderful Masterclass program is to help people get across that chasm, to get across that canyon, to get from who they have always thought of themselves as being to who they really are, because that's really been our journey.
That's the journey.
From your other person to this person, from my other person to this person, but even more profoundly, metaphysically speaking, from who you thought you were to who you really are. That's the journey. And it does not have to take a lifetime of struggle.
That's right.
It does not have to be the hugest mountain to climb. I don't want to, again, operate under false pretenses here. I'm not suggesting it'll happen overnight, but if you are committed to the journey, it could occur and bring you to completion a lot faster than you might know.
Yeah, I agree with that. That for a number of reasons. I think because of the, over the last 30 years, this teaching has inundated the newsphere of the planet. You go back 30, 40 years ago, this was kind of weird stuff. But today, every kid knows about The Secret, knows about the law of attraction, knows about affirmation.
Yes.
So within the atmosphere right now, the possibility for awakening, for enlightenment, whatever word you want to use, is way more potent than it was 30 or 40 years ago. Or you go back hundreds of years ago where there was a really dense condensation of consciousness. Thus, there were focuses on a singular person being an avatar or an awakened being. Now, you have the second coming in spiritual communities, in a number of people holding this frequency. So it is faster. And even in the shamanic traditions, they tell us now that, and even in the scientific community, shamanic traditions tell us that the earth is awake and is vibrating at a very high frequency. The scientific community tells us that the earth is vibrating at a higher frequency every single year. So the vibration that's existing right now is way higher than it was 30 years ago. So that gives us the condition for a quickening. And as you mentioned, if a person is sincere, they have a level of focus and practice, they don't have to do what we did. I like to say sometimes I was a little hard-headed, so I needed a certain dramatic experiences and things like that because I was an atheist. I mean, you may not believe it, I was an atheist. I convinced people when I was in college. I went out and convinced people that not to be a Christian, but to be an atheist. Me and a friend of mine who's now an attorney. I mean, and so I was a little hard-headed, So I really stand in agreement that it doesn't have to take toil in a lot of years. With sincerity, here are the two major practices: earnestness and sincerity. If you have a sincere desire to wake up and you have an earnestness to do your spiritual practice, even when you don't feel like it, the possibility for awakening and coming into an act of creation and inviting your soul to emerge at a higher level of destiny is there for us.
And let me offer this, if I might, offer what you just said in that last sentence. The program is called Discover Your Soul's Purpose. But I want to share with you my own thought about it. I do not think this is a process of discovery. It's important for me to say that to you. Otherwise, you might find yourself, trying to find out, it's a process of discovery. What do I have to do to discover my soul's purpose? Look under the right rock, look behind the right tree, read the right book, go to the right, workshop, the right seminar. How can I discover my soul's purpose? Don't go, in my opinion, don't go off on a journey of discovery. It's really a process of creation, that you are invited by life to create your soul's purpose. See, because there's a huge difference between those two words. Let me explain to you what I mean. If you think that life is a process of discovering your soul's purpose, you will think that your soul's purpose exists somewhere that maybe God gave you a purpose, or somehow or another you were given a purpose, and your job is to discover the purpose you were given. Ain't that way in my understanding. I could be wrong, but in my understanding, we were given the power to produce and generate our soul's purpose, but we were not given the purpose itself. So you get to create your soul's purpose. And then the next question is, well, how do I decide? If I'm supposed to create, oh, Neale, you just made it very complicated. I thought it was just about me discovering if I could just find out what it is. Now you're telling me it doesn't exist out there, as you know, I have to make it up myself? Yes. But that makes it even easier, because now God is saying, what brings you joy? What brings you happiness? What brings you the greatest sense of who you really are? What lights you up in the morning when you get up in the morning? What keeps you awake at night trying to fall asleep, but you can't because all the great thoughts are going through your mind? What is it that gives you back to yourself? That's your soul's purpose. That's your soul's agenda. I could be wrong about this, but I don't think so.
And under what he's saying, I use the word participation. We are participating in activating, releasing our soul's purpose and why we are here. And based on what he just said, I want to take us into an energetic experience for just a brief moment. So just close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep breath. Release. Just let your body relax. And just remember a moment, as Neale was talking, he used the word joy. I want you to remember a moment in which you were in full joy. You were surrounded by joy. Joy was all through you and all around you. Even peace, even you were in love, you were in peace, you were in joy. And if you can't remember such a time in your life, let your imagination be an angel of God for you right now. Just imagine what that would feel like. Now take a deep breath, but sustain the breath at the apex. Just hold the breath there. And when you hear the clap of my hand, release the breath, but amplify the joy 10 times. A little bit more air in. Multiply times 10 and just feel that joy. Now, in this feeling tone of joy, ask the question, who am I in this joy? Who am I? In this expanded state, who am I? You're probably not going to say you are where you were born. You're probably not going to say you are the son or daughter of your parents. You're probably not going to say what school you graduated from or what school you didn't graduate from. Who am I in this joy? Now ask, what steps and actions should I take to manifest this joy on earth? And please light up my steps. Illuminate my steps. So you're asking, who am I in joy? What steps should I take? And please light my path that I may see the steps to take to my joy. Be with that for just a moment. Who am I in joy? What steps should I take? Light my path. And as you are intuiting and catching that guidance in a language and in a way that you can understand, you have now set something in motion that you are now in the process of participating in and creating your destiny, your own individualized soul purpose. As you open your eyes in this moment, notice that you set something in motion You might catch it in a dream. You might catch it at a red light while you're driving your car or an insight, but you're not participating in an act of creation. Who are you enjoying? What steps and actions must you take? Please light my path. Let me see those steps. Have a blessed day.
And that's just the beginning. Wait until you go through all of the rest of the modules in this masterclass. We've just started. So stay with us, and we'll see you in the next module.